You're live.
I'm live. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and welcome to the Everyday Consent question and answer live stream. So you should be able to talk in the live chat. Jessi is moderating. So we do have a couple of questions that we got beforehand, but we will prioritize any live questions. So if you got any burning questions, ask them right now. But yeah, was there any other administrivia? Let us know if there's any problem with like any technological issues, like if you can't hear me or see me or anything like that. Just let Jessi know and we'll figure that out. But yeah, let's go ahead and ask me some questions.
Okay. Let's start with question from Anonymous.
Okay.
Can you talk a bit about using toys with a partner? Things like how to approach the subject, how to manage STIs if you're sharing toys, stuff like that.
Okay, using toys with a partner. So let's see. So I'll talk about STIs first. So if you're using a toy with a partner, and by toys we mean like, vibrators or cock rings or like basically anything that you would buy at a sex shop or see sold at a sex shop. The main thing for STIs is that if any toy is being used on multiple partners, then it's generally a good idea to put a condom on it or use some other sort of barrier, or make sure that it is cleaned really well between uses. And depending on the toy, it really depends on the material that the toy is made out of, how clean you can actually get it. So many toys are made out of high-grade silicone or metal or glass, and those toys are all non-porous, which means that they can be sterilized, and so they can actually be fully cleaned. So long as you have something made out of one of those materials, if you clean it thoroughly with some warm water and maybe some mild soap, then you should be good to go in using it again. But many other materials are porous and therefore cannot be fully sanitized between uses. So that would be things like not everything is made out of, like even things that are made out of silicone, it might depend on the type of silicone. Any toys that are like a jelly rubbery look, that's definitely that's going to be porous. And then currently all masturbation sleeves, so that would be like a fleshlight or something similar, all of those are made out of materials that are porous and therefore cannot be fully sanitized. So you can clean them, and you definitely would like, it would be good to clean them between uses, but they cannot be fully sanitized. So if you are worried about STI transmission and multiple partners are using them, then do use a barrier of some sort, so a condom or an internal condom. So that's the main thing with those. And then as far as was it just like starting the conversation with a partner? Was that the question, the first question? Yeah. So I mean, so I think one of the bigger barriers for people when it comes to talking about using toys with a partner, one of the common questions that comes up for people is them or their partner being worried about the suggestion of using a sex toy bringing up a lot of insecurity that your partner isn't enough on their own. And that's definitely, it's a reasonable insecurity for people to have. So it makes sense that they might worry about that. So the main thing that I would suggest, if that is something that you're encountering with a partner, is to do what you can to console them. Like, I do really enjoy the sex that we are having. I would just really like to explore some new things and maybe add to what we already have going. In particular, usually a good way to go is if you already are using toys on your own during masturbation and you want to combine that with partner sex, then you can tell your partner, hey, like, I would love to show you the way that I masturbate, and like get you involved in that process and share that with you. So that can be fun. Or the other way around, you might want to have a partner do that for you. You might want to say, like, I'd love to see how you like to be touched, and I just want to see how you react to different sensations, and I think it'd be really fun if we explore. So the main thing is just to do what you can to acknowledge any insecurities that they might have and try and console them, and do what you can to tell them that there's nothing to be insecure about, that you do really enjoy them without the toy, and this is really just about adding more fun, or adding something new, and exploring is the main thing. Make it more about an exploration than a need. I think would be a good place to be coming from. And a really good suggestion is if you're is to go with a sex shop to buy the toy with them. So make it an adventure to go to the sex shop together and pick something out. Or even if you're not comfortable going to a store, then just going online and looking at things and talking about what you think might be fun to try out. So in general, just make it a fun adventure and exciting exploration activity. That would be my main suggestion. So, cool. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question which I don't know if you're going to be able to answer off the top of your head.
Okay.
But this is a live question from Sandeep, which is, what are the most dangerous STIs? Which ones are not life-threatening?
That is a great question. Thank you, Sandeep. So most dangerous, it kind of depends on what you mean by that. And I think it depends on how quickly it gets treated. So I think currently the most dangerous in terms of impact on overall health and being life-threatening is still HIV. In that, so this is regardless of treatment, but definitely if it goes untreated, then HIV, of course, can, if left untreated, turn into AIDS, which is an autoimmune condition, which is very, very life-threatening and very, very dangerous. So HIV is probably still the big one, but even I made a video recently about some STI myths, and even HIV with treatment currently, a lot of those dangers can be mitigated. So it really depends on treatment. And then as far as other STIs, HPV would probably rank second in that some strains of HPV can lead to some forms of cancer, cervical cancer being one of the big ones. So that's another one that in the worst case definitely can be one of the more dangerous ones. That is something that would be looked for in your not necessarily annual, but a regular Pap screen or Pap smear. Usually when a person goes in for a routine examination like that, they're either looking for signs of cervical cancer itself or HPV or some combination of both. And that's sort of the main reason why, is that many strains of HPV can lead to cervical cancer. So that's sort of the second one. And then after that, I would say things like syphilis, gonorrhea, and chlamydia can be very dangerous if left untreated, but are not at all, not particularly dangerous if they are treated quickly, because all of those can be cured. They are bacterial infections and they can be cured with antibiotics. But if left untreated, I don't have the full list of all the different reactions, but many of them can lead to something called pelvic inflammatory disease. That's actually a pretty common theme with a lot of untreated STIs and other related problems. And that can lead to a lot of complications, namely for infertility and in some cases death. Pelvic inflammatory disease is one of the risks, and depending on the particular infection, there are other risks as well. Again, that is primarily if it goes untreated for a long time. So the sooner that someone knows that they have an infection and gets treatment, the better. And then I think and hepatitis is, I've been going sort of in order of most to least dangerous, but hepatitis, depending on some strains of hepatitis are considered sexually transmitted infections or possibly sexually transmitted, and those can be very dangerous. I don't have as much information on me about that right now, but yeah. And then sort of on the bottom of the totem pole is herpes, which definitely can have some issues if you have some other conditions going on, but for the most part, herpes is not especially dangerous. It's just very common and easy to spread.
Okay.
So, thanks for the question.
We have another question from Anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions for different ways to make open communication less scary and stressful? Like some people have weekly powwows, maybe note writing. Do you have any other ideas like that?
Totally. So I talked to this person briefly, and I think they're talking in terms of like in an ongoing relationship, figuring out how to make the talk or like just how to make ongoing communication a bit less scary. And the suggestions that this person gave are actually great suggestions, which is, can you say those two again?
Having a weekly powwow or writing notes.
Right. So the first one is related to basically like having a regular time set aside to talk about how the relationship is going, whether or not there is anything particularly scary or weighty going on. That's always that's actually that is a common solution for a lot of relationships. And in that way, there's like every time that you do that, like it's not very high pressure, right? Because you're like, oh, we're just like having our weekly chat, like we're just checking in, like, oh, we're doing okay, or oh, you like stepped on my hair, or like, oh, I'm like worried about meeting your mother next week, that sort of thing. Some other good suggestions that I have heard are if you are trying to have a conversation to actually, I have some notes about it. Could you pass me that?
So prepared.
Yeah. Well, because I went to a training about something related recently. Sort of on a similar vein, rather than having necessarily a weekly discussion, having some sort of system in place to indicate what kind of discussion it's going to be. So it can be really nice for if you are going to have kind of a potentially scary, serious conversation with your partner to tell them ahead of time, like, hey, I would, can we set aside some time to talk about this, like about our sex life or about, about our communication style, so that they have some idea going into the conversation, so they're not like freaking out about like, what is this talk about? So giving some sort of indication about that. Somebody even suggested having like color coding talks. So like if you're like, oh, this is like a sex talk, then that's like, yellow, or if it's a like, feelings talk, then it's like blue, or if it's a like, like I'm kind of angry, it's red card. Some sort of indication of just like to prepare a little bit of just so it's not coming all out of the blue what you're going to be talking about. That tends to be pretty helpful. So, and on a similar note, just if, because like I think this is what the taking notes suggestion might have been, is if you are going into a conversation that maybe you are nervous about, you do have some emotion about, writing down a little bit of what you actually want to say before you get into the conversation, because it can be very stressful in the moment, even if it is something that you ultimately don't feel too stressed about. Just the fact that you're like, this is a talk that we're having can make it difficult to talk about what you wanted to. On a similar note, when you are sort of processing beforehand what you want to talk about, it can be really good to try and identify what your goal for the conversation is. That can be really helpful, especially if it's something related to, like, if you're like really angry, or if there's a lot of emotion wrapped up into it, then it can be really helpful to be like, okay, what do I actually want to get out of this? Do I just want my partner to understand why I'm upset? Do I want them to do something in particular, or do I just want them to feel guilty? So like identifying what your motivations are beforehand can help you to, one, either decide that maybe that's not the most productive thing to do, or to just help you frame how you want to talk to your partner about it, and also make it clear to them why you're talking about this. So yeah.
Seems good.
All right. Places to start.
We have a question. Oh, we got a request for you to repeat the questions after I say them, because apparently it's much harder to hear me than it is to
Okay, cool. From now on, I will do that.
I'll give you a tough one from Erin.
Okay.
Drunk people can't consent, of course.
Mm-hmm.
However, at what point in a relationship does it become safe for couples to drink and engage in sexual activity? Should one always abstain from sex while drinking? If the partner is coherent and giving clear signs of consent, is everything okay?
Great question.
So question first.
Okay, so this question is, to paraphrase somewhat, alcohol and consent, basically. And in particular, it sounds like if people are already in a relationship, at what point is it okay, or is it ever okay to be drinking and to engage in sexual activity if you've been drinking?
I think I'm gonna moderator change the question.
Okay.
Just like, does being in a long-term relationship affect, like, so how does consent and alcohol interplay, kind of like the surface level of that, and how can being in a long-term relationship affect that?
Okay, so Jessi's modification of the question is just a general question about the interplay between alcohol and consent in general, and then in particular, how does being in a long-term relationship affect that? So alcohol and consent. This is obviously a bit of a complicated question, and we've done a couple of videos that I think are very relevant in terms of, like, alcohol is a complicating factor, right? So, like, obviously it is not good to have sex with someone who is, like, falling down drunk. Like, that's a pretty clear, not consensual situation. However, in many cases, it might seem like could totally be fine to, like, have a glass of wine with dinner and then have sex with your partner. And so definitely, like, the relationship between consent and alcohol is complicated, and in particular because alcohol is something that can impair judgment and can lower someone's boundaries, and can not only can, like, change the decisions that someone might make, but also could change the way that they can or cannot communicate the decisions they have or have not made. It's definitely dangerous. Like, it's alcohol being in the mix makes things a bit more complicated and more difficult. And so that doesn't, in my opinion, I don't think that means that there can never be a drop of alcohol involved where there is sex involved. That is not my personal opinion. What I think that means is that if there is alcohol involved, there needs to be even more communication than you're already doing. There needs to be even more of an understanding of, like, if there is any sort of indication that the person that you're interacting with, especially if they're the one that's drunk, or actually even if you are as well, same thing. If there are any warning signs, become much bigger warning signs. And so definitely erring on the side of caution is what I would suggest when it comes to alcohol. In terms of long-term relationships with alcohol, there actually, in my opinion, is a bit of an opportunity there, because if you're in a longer-term relationship, there is you have more of an ability to know the person and know how they act in certain situations, and hopefully, like, actually, I think what I would suggest is if you are in a long-term relationship, get to know how this person acts on alcohol in general before you try to, like, this doesn't have to be like a hard and fast rule, but I think in my opinion, I think one of the important things with alcohol is that alcohol affects everyone a little bit differently. So to as much as you can, try and get an understanding of how this person acts when they are drunk, and how quickly this person gets drunk, and how easy or not it is to tell how drunk they are. Because, like, for some people, like, you know, they can have a glass of wine and be, like, the same person, and like have no changes to their decision-making abilities or their communicating abilities, whereas somebody else might be, like, in a completely different place and not very communicative about that. So anyway, all of that is to say, in a long-term relationship, use as much as you can the fact that you have known this person for a longer time and have more time to figure things out with them, to go even more slowly and try and feel things out. And also, honestly, the first thing that I would suggest is talk to your partner about this, and talk amongst yourselves about what you think is okay when you're drunk, because honestly, like, it matters much more whether you and your partner are okay with things than whether, like, than whether that particular setup would work for a different couple. So
just to clarify, you're specifying you should talk while sober about being drunk.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. So Jessi clarified you should talk about alcohol before you are drunk, and also probably not while you're having sex either. So pretty much with anything, it is pretty generally a good idea when you're having a conversation about like how you communicate and how you want to communicate. And definitely anything where there's a complicating factor like alcohol, talk about it while you're not in that situation. So while you and your partner are not drunk and are probably not in the middle of having sex, talk about how you feel about having sex while drunk and go from there. So
cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very long-winded. Sorry.
That's fine. That's typical Sarah.
Jessi's used to that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Do you have any suggestions on the like actual mechanics of buying sex toys in terms of going to shops? Like you talked about this briefly before, but in terms of going to shops versus like doing it online, and how much research do you need to do in advance, and like packaging if it's going to be delivered to your office and things like that.
Okay, so tips and tricks. Sure. So the main thing that I would suggest is right. So the question is a bit more information about sex toys and sort of the specifics of going about buying sex toys, going into a shop versus going online, how much you need to research beforehand, and how to deal with packaging if it's like whether if you're ordering something in the mail, whether it'll be sent to you like to your office or something, and whether it'll be obviously a dildo or not. So first thing I would say is that a lot of sex shops, like the actual shops in person, are great resources. I can later on give a list of sex shops that I know are really good on this, something like Good Vibrations or Babeland, and many others. Most of the people that work at a lot of different sex shops are actually so helpful and so happy to answer questions, whether or not you actually buy something that day. So if you are comfortable and able to go to a sex shop, and if there's one near you that you feel comfortable going to, I would definitely start there. As far as like general recommendations, another reason that I would suggest going to or going if you're going online, going through an actual sex shop, is that buying sex toys online can be really dicey because they're sex toys and I think lube as well. There is no regulation of it in the United States. So there's no like FDA regulation of sex toys or anything like that, as there would be with like medications or other things that are going into your body. So that's not a great thing. And part of what that leads to is that particularly if you're buying things on Amazon, there have been a lot of issues of counterfeit toys being sold on Amazon. And the problem with that is that like there is much less of a guarantee of whether, I mentioned materials earlier, whether they're made out of materials that are safe to put in your body. And so that can definitely be a danger. And the main thing to keep in mind with that is that some of the more established brands are going to be safer bets because a lot more people have reviewed them. They have built trusted relationships with these better sex shops that often like have a lot of their own review processes, and they're just sort of trusted in the community. So unfortunately, that does mean that those tend to be the more expensive toys. So there is a bit of an issue there if cost is an issue. I do have a list of some decent toys under $25 that I can pull up and put in the description later on. So that can be a place to start, but definitely cost is kind of an ongoing issue with sex toys, unfortunately. So that's the main thing to keep in mind. And let's see. And yeah, just in general, like porous, non-porous is something to keep in mind in terms of how to clean it. Any silicone toys, you just want to be careful and not use them with silicone lubes because there is a lot of indication that it could break down the silicone and therefore not be become porous, basically, and harbor bacteria. And let's see, those would be the main things to keep in mind. Yeah, but again, like it depends on where you are though, because you might not live in a part of the country. Also, I'm mostly talking about the US, but you might not live in a place where you have access to a sex shop. So like the online store of something like Good Vibes or something might be a good place to start. Also, they have phone lines that you could call.
What?
Or you can call a volunteer organization I just started working with called San Francisco Sex Information. So sfsi.org could probably give you more specific information about if you just ask them about like where you live and information about sex toys. You can start there.
Okay, cool. We have another live question,
Yay!
Also from Sandeep.
I feel like I should do a live question dance.
Do it.
Okay.
Okay. This question I'm again altering slightly.
Okay.
But the question is kind of your thoughts on approaching BDSM or other kink things like for the first time.
Totally. Okay, so the question is about approaching BDSM or kink exploration for the first time. So I think the main thing that I would suggest is that find out many cities, especially in the US, have existing BDSM or kink communities, and one of the really common practices in these communities is something called a munch, which is a non-sexual sort of meet and greet event. And so what I would suggest is is going to something like a munch, or in some other ways trying to meet a couple people in the community and just sort of get an idea of like meet people and ask them your questions, because talking to someone in person is often going to be a much better way to get an understanding of like what the norms are in the community and what you might want to start with, that sort of thing. In terms of finding something like that, there are a couple places online to start. I would start with either fetlife.com is sort of a Facebook for kink, and there's some many people in the community have mixed feelings about it, but often it is a great place to find information about events in your area. Another good website to start with is societyofjanus.com, and again, I can put those in the description later. So those will be some good information. In general, what I would suggest is try and gather some information. Again, like try and meet people, try and get involved in the community a little bit to get some sort of understanding of what you think you might be interested in trying. But also one note that like there is no spectrum of kinky. There is no I'm totally vanilla or I'm totally into everything. Kink and BDSM and these worlds are just sort of a collection of different interests. And so just because you are into being tied up does not mean that like you have to be into being peed on, or even that that's the next step or anything like that. Plenty of people are into some things and really not into other things. And something that I would just suggest is like, don't try not to be seduced by the idea of becoming really hardcore, because that's not really the way things are, and that's also in many cases leads to people feeling pressured to do things that they don't actually want to do. So just sort of start slow, find out what there is, talk to people. That's where I would start.
Cool. Okay. Thoughts on being out at work, out as in LGBTQ or kinky or whatever else you can be out about.
Yeah. So the question is, what are my thoughts on being out at work? And that's out as being LGBTQ or kinky, etc. Main thing I have to say is that I don't get to make up that decision for you. I don't know. So like my personal experience, which is limited because I am only 24 and I've like only been in the workforce a couple of years, but my experience is that it's surprisingly hard to be out at work, even though like I live in the Bay Area, in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is a pretty like thought of as a pretty liberal place, and definitely on the scale of the rest of the US is. Even so, sexuality is still not a thing that's really talked about in professional spaces a lot. Again, it totally depends on the office and the industry, that sort of thing. But even if you're in an area or at a place where most people would be okay with you coming out, like you're not going to be discriminated against for being gay or trans or anything, it might still be actually quite difficult to come out about that. and especially anything that is even more directly related to sexuality, like being kinky or being poly or something like that. Not that either is harder or less hard, but yeah, I mean, I guess the main thing that I would say is that like it can be really difficult, and I think it really is just a matter of deciding for yourself like balancing for yourself your own feelings of security and safety versus your own feelings of needing to be honest and needing to be able to relate to those people around you and know and have them know who you really are. And that's not something that I or anyone else can decide for you. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, like I know that this was definitely something that I struggled with at my last job, because it wasn't like, it definitely wasn't an environment that was particularly negative about any of the stuff, but I felt very uncomfortable talking about my relationships and in particular any of my interests in sexuality in general. So like I actually started this channel while I was working and felt super, super uncomfortable telling people about it, that sort of thing. And so I do understand the struggle. I had a positive experience when I did start telling a couple of coworkers about it, that they happened to be pretty supportive. And you may find that, like, if you do decide to come out, you may find that you have more support than you expected to have. And actually something that I really noticed is that, like, if you speak up, many other people start doing so as well. And so that might turn into a really positive thing. But it's up to you. Hopefully that was at all helpful.
All right. All right, we'll do a light one.
Okay.
This question's from Anne. Sex playlist suggestions.
Oh my God. So this question is, do I have any sex playlist suggestions? And the thing is, this is an ongoing question that I have for other people. So like, by sex playlist, I'm assuming that this person means like music to play during sex. Basically my question, what I would say is, if you have a suggestion, please put it in the comments like right now. But yeah, I don't know. I've gotten a couple of suggestions of like some sort of more like house music, like very ethereal, like sort of background stuff. But then like some people are super into like R&B, like outright like this is like sex music kind of stuff going on. Man, this is not a question I'm prepared to answer, but please give me and the person that asked this question some answers in the comments, please, like right now. And then let's make a Spotify sex playlist. That would make me so happy.
Okay. This is the question from Anonymous.
Okay.
Is lying ever okay if I think that's what my partner needs to feel safe or be happy in a relationship?
So the question is lying ever okay if I think that's what my partner needs to feel safe or happy in a relationship? Oh God. My answer is, I'm again gonna state the caveat that I can only give my own opinion. So I don't know. I think it really depends on how big of a lie it is, like what the sort of lie is, and whether it's a question of like hiding something really big to them that's going to have an impact on them, but you just don't want them to worry about it, or something that is more like, I don't know, like, so I think it really just depends on what the question is. I personally, I have some pretty strong feelings about, in my relationships, I value honesty like pretty highly, almost to a fault, to the point where like, if like I would prefer me and my partner be honest with each other, even if that's like kind of hurtful. But that's not necessarily the right thing for everyone. I think the main thing that I would suggest is, again, sort of having a meta conversation with your partner about this question, like about whether they are like, about how they prioritize honesty and what different kinds of honesty. And like, if it's a matter of just like, you know, sort of the classic, like your partner asking you like, does this dress make me look fat or whatever? Like if that's something that like they would rather like like they would rather you just say what sounds nice rather than like them actually asking for your opinion. Like if like that sort of class of question versus like if you are attracted to other people, do you want like while you're, and it's a monogamous relationship, like do you want your partner to know about that or not? Like that's a whole nother class of question. And so I guess what I'm saying is have a conversation with your partner about expectations for honesty and communication about that, which might be hard to anticipate. It might just like I imagine in real life this probably would only come up once you have a conflict about it. So that might be a bit difficult, but yeah, I think the main thing is just it really depends on you and your partner and what works for you two. So try and anticipate that a little bit or have a deep conversation about it when it comes up.
How would you start a conversation about are you okay
with me lying
to you?
Yeah.
Without that being like
that's fair.
Awkward.
That's a fair question. So Jessi asked, how would you start a conversation with your partner about like, are you okay with me lying to you? I think the question is more along the lines of what does honesty mean to you, and to what degree do you value or prioritize knowing exactly what I'm thinking, basically. I think it's much more about like, yeah.
No, that was a good answer.
Okay. No, important clarifying point, Jessi. Thank you.
All right.
Hi, everyone.
Okay. Here is, we had another question that I was going to ask, but it was basically the same question. So thank you also to Anonymous.
Thank you, Anonymous.
This is another question from Anonymous. And it's, survivors are often critiqued for being too aggressive with calls for justice against their perpetrator. They are also criticized for being too meek. What are your recommendations for survivors who are trying to tell their story in order to be heard and not critiqued? And how, as a society, can we overcome this habit of consistently looking for a way to critique survivors as good or bad survivors?
So a really simple, easy question then. Okay, cool. So this question is, if I remember correctly, survivors, so sexual assault survivors are often critiqued for being too, aggressive about wanting to see their attacker meeting justice, but also criticized for being too meek and not speaking out enough. And the question is, was it suggestions for survivors?
It's both suggestions for survivors, and how can we as a society help survivors how can we as a society move to not thinking about survivors as good or bad survivors? Okay,
and so the question is, how any suggestions for survivors dealing with this, and how can we as a society move past seeing survivors as good or bad survivors? Not an easy question to answer. The main thing that I would say is like, before I address like how we as a society can move to this, it is important to clarify that like there is no such thing as a good or a bad survivor. Trauma, like sexual assault trauma, we have a lot of research and data to know that it affects people in just wildly unpredictable ways. There are a lot of really common themes, like somebody might be really emotionally upset and like crying and upset, or they might be really angry, or they might like completely shut down, or they might they might lash out, or they might like not want to talk about it. Like there are so many different ways that like someone's mind and body reacts to trauma that like often in issues when an account comes up of an accusation of sexual assault, there is often a lot of criticism and scrutiny applied to the survivor to figure out if they're a real survivor, depending based on how they're acting. And honestly, that kind of all needs to be thrown out completely, because there is nothing like you can't tell if somebody is telling the truth by how they're acting, because they could just be reacting in a way that you don't expect. There was actually an NPR episode about this pretty recently where like a survivor like sort of reacted in a very like neutral, like rational way after she was attacked, and she like told her family members and friends about it, and they thought that she was lying and told the police that they thought that she was lying because she was like being too normal about it. And then years later, they found out like new evidence was entered into the case that she was totally telling the truth, and that's awful. And so I don't know. So like anyway, the point of that is just that like we do need to move away from this feeling that there are like of in any way prescribing how someone is supposed to react to trauma. There is no supposed to react to trauma. As far as suggestions for survivors to handle how to react to it, and it sounded like the question was mostly about like how to talk about it and how to like bring it up, and like whether to be really angry and want justice, or to be really meek and
when survivors want to share their story.
When survivors want to share their story. Honestly, like unfortunately, it like there's the world is not a very supportive place for that at the moment. I mean, the main recommendation that I would have is that there do try and reach out to sexual assault survivor support networks that do exist. I don't have the only one that I have on the top of my head right now is RAINN.org, and I think they have a hotline as well. So there are some national resources for that, and usually the main thing with that is that there are trained people to talk to you to figure out what you want to do. And that's the main thing is that like if you are in school or something, and or even at your job, and if you know that there are resources available of trained people to talk to you and help you wade your way through the process of dealing with this, then that can be a hugely helpful thing, just to help you figure out what you want to do and give you some support as you move forward with that. And yeah, so you might have some local ones, or there are some national ones as well, and I can try and find some information and leave that. That's the extent to which I have useful information to give you. So I'm going to leave it at that. And yeah, I'm going to leave it at that for now.
Okay. Do you feel like you addressed how can we as society deal with this other than just not critique survivors?
Yeah, I mean, so Jessi's question was reiterating the question about like how can we as a society move past critiquing survivors. I'm not really sure. I think this is a really big problem that I am also kind of consistently trying to work through myself. I think currently a lot of what's being done is a lot more awareness around that. And I think actually in the example that I gave about the NPR story that I heard, like they were comparing two different cases, and in that one, none of the officers involved had any training with trauma and stuff like that. And in another case that went much more well, there was a program in place so that the officers and people that were interacting with the survivor had actual training and knowledge about how trauma affects people, and it made a huge difference. So yeah, I mean, I guess the main thing that I would say is more awareness and more push for support for survivors, and more push for training and knowledge about what sexual assault is and what it does to people, and what other forms of trauma do to people, and how the people and how people dealing with those things tend to act, and how they process it and how to support them. So mostly just spreading knowledge and awareness, and pushing for, when it comes to things like legislation, like pushing for more support and resources towards that. That's the extent to which I have ideas for what to do, but start there.
Okay. We're gonna do, all right, actually, I'm just going to ask you our wrap-up questions.
Wrap-up questions? Okay.
First of all, this is the last episode of Everyday Consent Season 2, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so this is the last episode of Everyday Consent Season 2. We're going to be taking a break for the summer. And yeah, so I'm starting grad school in the fall, which is really exciting. And our plan is to come back for a third season in September. That is the current plan. We may update less often, but there will be more information about that as we get closer. But more importantly, like Everyday Consent is taking a break from regular video uploads for the next couple of months, but we will still be on social media, and I do still exist. So do feel free to keep talking to me and keep asking me questions. And also, if you guys have ideas of like things that you'd want to hear from me, or things that you'd like to see when we start up again in the fall, please let me know. Please tweet me or email me at everydayconsent@gmail.com or message me on Facebook, that sort of thing. I definitely want to know what you guys have to say. But most importantly, we'll still be on social media, so still interact with us, and we'll see you in the fall.
All right, we have one more question.
One more question.
The question is, can we get another live question dance?
Yes, you could get another live question dance. There we go. You're welcome.
Okay. Do you... I guess, do you have any suggestions for people who want like more everyday consent type things during the hiatus, like resources or places for people to go to learn stuff?
Okay, so the question was, do I have suggestions for resources or places for people to go who want more everyday consent type stuff during our hiatus? The main thing I would say is do follow us on social media, and I can post more things about that. Also, I did mention this earlier, but I just started working for San Francisco Sex Information. So that's an organization here in the Bay Area, and it's a phone line and email resource, so you can send in any sort of questions about about sex. It's not consent specific, but yeah, I'll be working there, and so there's a non-zero chance that I'll be the one answering your question if you do that. And on top of that, there are also like lots of other sex ed sources. So like on YouTube in particular, there's Explanations by Lindsay Doe. There's Lacey Green, who are both of which I'm a really big fan of. And let's see, there are lots of others, but those are the two that I'm thinking of right now. And I can, yeah.
You can say in this mysterious list of future sources.
Yeah, in this mysterious list of future resources that I'm totally going to put together. I am. It's just going to take a minute. But yeah, and also if you have any specific questions of a resource that you would like, then tweet me or email me or message me. Like I literally have just been training for a couple months on how to give resources when people have questions. So feel free to do that. Yeah.
All right, I think that's it.
All right, I think that's it. So happy consenting, folks. I'll see you next fall. And thank you so much to everybody that tuned in and gave me live questions and caused me to live dance. But yeah, all right. Bye-bye. We good?